So thank you so much for having me here today at Harvard Law School. I'm absolutely delighted to be here as always. Thank you so much, and thank you to Professor Duncan Kennedy for also giving comments and participating in this discussion. So today I'm going to talk about Brexit and misconceptions of governance. As you know, United Kingdom is about to leave the European Union, and that is just a huge, huge event with huge repercussions within the European Union now. However, and I will be arguing this today, Brexit has falsely been understood as an aberration, as an exception to the existing state of affairs, as an exception to how the European Union is run today. So I will argue that Brexit is not an aberration, not at all. It is actually, this event is totally on the continuum of existing thinking about the European Union today, on an exhausted continuum of thinking about the European Union. So what do I mean by that? You all know that the European Union has been conceived as a new legal order, basically. So there's an idea that there was a Sonderweg, a special way that was set up in the European Union, that the EU took a completely different way than all other international organizations, other social experiments around the world did. So Joseph Weiler has argued that the European Union has a very special community ethos, an ethos of self-limitation, an ethos of inclusion of the other that can be contrasted with the union ethos. So what do these two ethoses mean? What about them? So first of all, the community ethos, the one of self-limitation, is embracing this Habermasian idea that we're all including other people in daily governance. Right? So, for example, when I'm buying goods from a different country in the European Union, or when a court is considering, let's say, an arrest warrant from a different court in the European Union, right? So there's a constant inclusion of the other in the EU. And that's the ethics of self-limitation. Now, the union ethos is an ethos of either national or full union self-interest. What does that mean? So it means either full sovereignty or a full political union without particular member states having much say in what is going on in the EU. Okay? So I've been arguing that a distinction between these two ethos is actually wrong. And in order to portray that, I put them on the continuum of thinking in terms of Duncan Kennedy's idea of a continuum between individualism and altruism. So what does that mean in this context? So on the one end of the spectrum, we have full self-interest, full sovereignty. At the other end of the spectrum, we have full solidarity. So full altruism. And once we put Weiler's idea of these two distinct ethoses on this continuum, it actually shows that what he's saying is union ethos are actually the ends of the continuum. Right? We have the full political union here, and we have an exit, full sovereignty here. Right? And this community ethos is in between them. Right? So in this perspective, an exit or Brexit is completely in line with the existing thinking about the EU today. So exit, community ethos, full political union. Now the problem is that this is actually a spectrum of disaggregated sovereignty. This is how we think about the EU today. Do member states have more or less powers in relation to European institutions? Are we creating a free trade agreement, the customs union, the common market, the political union, right? So this has been a discussion about the European Union since the beginning. So what are the problems with this thinking? First, this ethos, which is supposed to be very special, is actually not even that special anymore, right? It's simply a position of institutional centrism. And the problem of this ethos is that it ceases to animate the population. So it's an ethos of interdependence, of institutional interdependence. And Europeans today are not craving for more institutional interdependence. So we see our interdependence in our daily lives. We see it in stores, we see it in schools, we see it on TV. We know already that we Europeans are interdependent. It does not animate us anymore. It did after the Second World War, when Europe was basically destroyed. People said we need more interdependence. Today, this is not something that the population is interested in anymore. The second problem is that we speak about the inclusion of the other, yet exclusion is inevitable, right? So even if you think about, let's say, the Hegelian master-slave dialectics, right? So when we are constituting our own individuality, we constituted it by excluding others. Or from a distributional perspective, someone always loses, right? There are always losers in society. So the idea that there's constant inclusion of the other simply cannot hold water. Third, the problem is we just keep talking about disaggregated sovereignty. More sovereignty, less sovereignty, more power to member states, less power to member states, right? So, and all of these combined, all of these problematic elements actually led to Brexit, right? Brexit, again, is not an aberration, but is a result of a combination of these three problems. So, let me explain that. First of all, people in the UK were just not interested in this ethos anymore. Several felt excluded, particularly those in the periphery of England and Wales. And the only way they were actually able to express and articulate that exclusion has been by disaggregated sovereignty. So all their problems were articulated in a sense of let's just simply leave the union. And that is the problem with elites actually, because the elites have not been able to produce a different discourse than the one that we've been hearing for decades, right? Segregated sovereignty. So here you can see how people voted on Brexit in the United Kingdom. So basically, Scotland, Northern Ireland were generally against it, but it was really the periphery of England and the periphery of Wales who voted overwhelmingly for Brexit. London, as the centre, was against it. So, and this causes all sorts of problems actually. It causes problems in Brexit negotiations. We're talking about disaggregated sovereignty, that's what I mean. So this causes problems, this element, this discursive element that we are obsessed about as lawyers cause problems. So what is the UK now faced with? They are saying we need to take back control, right? More sovereignty. What does that mean? So, control today in international governance really is an illusion. Right? Full sovereignty in today's interdependent world is an illusion, no matter how powerful a country one comes from. So, as you know, the European Union is a huge regulatory, extremely powerful regulatory machinery. The European Commission, for instance, employs almost 30,000 people. It has huge manpower. And it is only the United States that comes close, actually, to the power of the EU regulatory machinery. And, even when the UK leaves the Union, this huge machinery will still have effects on the United Kingdom. First, the EU is, like the United States, the only jurisdiction which is able to exercise its extraterritorial jurisdiction, particularly in antitrust law, but also environmental law and several other legal fields. And there will also be a big informal impact. So basically all the rules, regulations that are produced in Brussels have simply informal impact across the world. People are simply taking those regulatory solutions, and particularly a country in the neighborhood of the European Union is completely unable to ignore them. So taking back control is really an illusion, and is again in line with existing thinking about the European Union. So, but then there's another problem actually about this discourse that I described, right? So that we want more inclusion of the other, disaggregated sovereignty. These elements remain unsatisfactory. Right? They remain unsatisfactory not just for the United Kingdom, but also for those who are staying in the European Union. Playing only with these discursive elements simply does not open up the transformative possibilities of the European Union. It arrests our social imagination. So power relationships are not adequately addressed in this thinking. And, as I've been saying, UK leaving is basically a reproduction of this false necessity of linear integration, basically. Right? More or less common market, more or less customs union, and so forth. So rather than thinking about how to reshape policy, how to reshape the union. And the problem is that we just don't have any other grid of thinking that we could actually use to transform the European Union. So it's been suggested we should think more in terms of left and right politics in the EU, but that didn't play out so well, right? People have been ignoring and the population at large has been ignoring the European Parliament. But as I've argued several times, even the left and the right dialectics does not adequately capture the power relationships, the problems, and so forth that are occurring on the internal market and within the European Union. So we need a different grid of thinking about the EU. Okay, so I'm showing you here the map, just so that you can visualize, this continent that is in need of, that has accomplished so much, but is in huge need of transformation still. So I've been actually proposing to think about societies in general and about the European Union specifically in terms of hierarchies. So what does that mean? I've been arguing that a legal system should be understood as a constant hierarchical structure of production, as a constant hierarchical struggle, and that the law in action is actually hierarchical structure as constituted in every moment in time. So each of us is in every second of our lives put in a particular hierarchical position. And we, in this structure of production, right? In the structure of production of goods, services, knowledge, dreams, anything. Right? And I've been arguing that privilege to harm or injury is actually the lowest common denominator of the legal system. So how do we play with these elements in the context of the European Union? The problem is that there has been a selective understanding of harm. So some harms, some privileges to harm are acknowledged and some are not. And I argue that this should be the basis of the reconfiguration of entitlements within the European Union, and should allow us to experiment with the society and to open up ways of political contestation. So the center-periphery relationship that I've been talking about for years now is actually a macro-hierarchical structure of these smaller dispersed hierarchies. So what is the center-periphery relationship? Just very briefly. So countries of the center are, let's say, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Germany, and so forth. The periphery is Greece, Slovenia, Estonia, Poland, Portugal, and so on. And the problem that I've been having is that, when one sees the European Union from this perspective, when one sees that there's a selective perception of harm in the EU, when one understands that those who are already in a privileged hierarchical position have more privileges to harm those who are in a subordinate position, the conclusion is that the United Kingdom will actually remain central to the European Union despite leaving the EU, and peripheral regions within the EU will remain peripheral despite being in the European Union. So, this is the City of London. The City of London is extracting rents from around the world, not just within the European Union, but really worldwide. Right? And it puts London at the very top of hierarchical production in the world. So you see here the Queen, the royal wedding. This is one of the most powerful brands the United Kingdom has, and there are several. The UK has the best universities. The UK has, excellent services and so forth. So, despite leaving the Union, I'm arguing, it will stay at the top of the hierarchical structure of production. Now, that does not mean that the UK will actually not suffer from Brexit. It may totally, and it has already had that. The pound has fallen, I think, about 25% since the Brexit vote, and I'm very worried about it because I'm spending euros and earning pounds, and my salary is just rapidly decreasing with the pound falling. So it's a different argument from, the argument that the UK may suffer from Brexit is actually different from the argument that it will stay on top of the hierarchical structure of production. And these are two different elements that are not mutually exclusive. Okay, so what should we do? What should we do to rethink the EU, right? I'm arguing we should be addressing the structure, right? We should identify those privileges to harm that we think are unjust. And just to tell you, just to give you one example of this imbalance, of this structural imbalance on the EU internal market, how the privileges to harm of the center are actually not seen by the legal profession, and privileges to harm of the periphery are prohibited. So social dumping is the usage of cheaper labor in cross-border transactions, and it is prohibited actually, right? And this is how the periphery can harm the standard, and that's off the table, right? It cannot be done. Whereas goods dumping is completely unseen by the EU legal profession. So I've been arguing that companies of the center have a select legally sanctioned privilege to harm companies of the periphery, which is allowed, right, under free movement and competition rules. So you see the structural imbalance. That one prohibited, that one not even noticed. So basically, I identified the structure, articulated the consistent privileges to harm in this hierarchical structure of production that is open only to companies of the center. So this is a structural imbalance, and it is these kind of imbalances that I believe we need to address in order to rethink the union. Okay, well, thank you so much for your attention. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.